Are we ready to go? Okay, excellent. Okay, well, welcome. Good afternoon. We are really, this is a real treat. We've got an amazing panel here, so let's just jump in. So my name's Mark Donegan. I'm going to be your moderator. This is the hybrid TV panel. The subject is delivering the ultimate TV, you can put in parentheses, entertainment experience. And we're going to have just a really fabulous discussion over the next hour and 15 minutes. I guess I'd like to just jump right in, and I've asked the panelists to introduce themselves. Real quick intro, who they are, who their company is, or who they're representing, and then we're going to start into the discussion. So, Josette, start with you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Josette Bonte. I'm currently the Chief Strategy Officer and Head of Research at the Institute for Communication Technology Management at USC. I know it's quite a mouthful. The USC CTM, as we call it, is a forward-thinking, industry-facing institute located at the convergence, or not so convergence, between Silicon Valley and Hollywood. We actually produce a slate of annual research programs for our sponsors, as well as special events, mostly focusing on digital media. Our sponsors, who are also our clients, include large telecommunications companies, like my colleague on this panel, Nokia, Cisco Systems, Ericsson, as well as telecommunications operators like Verizon, AT&T, and so forth, as well as Hollywood studios. So my role consists in performing industry relations tasks, as well as overseeing all the research. So I will not detail all the research that we have, but specifically to the interest of this panel, we're in the fourth year on the Future of Media research program, which looks at the evolving business models of filmed entertainment, not just from the standpoint of entertainment companies, but from the standpoints of our sponsor companies as well, namely MVPD Telecommunications, as well as technology. So we also look at the technological impact of what we are discussing. So, and my comments on this panel will be shaped by my 30 years of experience working in entertainment, technology, and telecom. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dana Forte. I'm a product manager at Vubiquity. I liken Vubiquity in some respects to like an eBay. eBay's got a couple objectives like us. We help connect folks together. We don't have buyers and sellers, but we connect content providers with video distributors. We service over 600 content providers and close to 1,000 video distributors. And very much like an eBay, they're successful because they really help wring the inefficiencies in the marketplace that exist. And we do the same as well. So, we save an individual video distributor, which is like a Comcast or a Netflix, anybody that sells content directly onto a consumer. We save them from having to work with hundreds of content providers and take content in a multitude of different formats. We normalize that content based on the formats we receive. If we have 600 content providers, we probably get that content about 400 to 500 different ways, but we normalize that down. And then we work with each video distributor and provide them a unique distribution according to their specifications. Some may want mezzanine, some may want ABR, some may want that published directly to a CDN, but we deal with the entire package of content. We have a range of content services. We have over 1,000 live channels running through our plant today, and we power those into cable companies so they can send those on directly to their consumers. And we also can offer live streaming to any OTT service provider as well. We offer on-demand services for every business model you can think of, whether it be free, subscription, transactional, and we also have licensing services as well. And so what that means is we license content from content providers, and what's unique about it is the type of licenses that we receive allow video distributors to sell directly to their end consumers. So they don't necessarily have to work with hundreds of content providers. They can come directly to us for those services. And we also have a range of managed services as well. We do things like marketing, promotion. We can also do retail price management for content. And we also have an end-to-end platform that's inclusive of an app experience, so a storefront. We can white label that storefront so content providers and video distributors can create direct-to-consumer experiences for their customers. And it's already pre-integrated into our content cloud to make that launch seamless and pretty efficient. We also provide royalty reporting and reconciliation, so we can take the license and transactions that occur. We make sure content providers get paid. We also have an analytics service as well, so really kind of two key services there. One is to help increase buys, and the last thing is really to make sure they've got the right mix of content on their platform.
Hello, my name is Nash Parker. I'm Director of Emerging Technologies and IoT Ecosystem Development for Nokia. Think of Nokia not so much as the handset maker, we don't do that anymore. Think of us more as the network equipment and infrastructure provider for worldwide communications. In the context of the hybrid TV topic, my background started in advertising, went through video games, and then ended up in IPTV, which you might know as Uverse. So I think I know a little bit about the television environment. Right now, Nokia is pursuing 5G, and that standard is going to help with, I believe, the topic as well because of the mobile delivery aspects that will come along with that kind of technology.
Hi, my name is Ed Haslam. I'm with Conviva. I'm the CMO. Conviva, if you're not familiar with it, enables every internet-connected screen to have a perfect TV viewing experience by enabling OTT businesses to elevate the way they use data. So specifically, we put client software in every video screen that our publishers operate in. We operate for publishers such as HBO, ESPN, Sky, and many others. Collect experience, quality of experience data of the consumer experience on the screen or in the glass, as they say, and then use that data to help provide a better quality of experience, and then also to use that data to help those publishers make better decisions about their content, about their syndication strategies, about their marketing efforts, by elevating that data to more business impactful metrics. And then most recently, we took that data initiative and we opened it up to an ecosystem initiative that actually VDMS is a member of, where that data is being shared amongst all the constituents in the video delivery ecosystem so that everyone can help provide a better quality of experience. The unique part of Conviva's business is we're a third party that isn't part of the video delivery. We're measuring and helping optimize the video delivery on behalf of the people such as VDMS and Adobe and others, level 3, who are part of our ecosystem initiative to provide a better quality of experience for publishers such as HBO so their consumers can have a better experience. Little anecdote, over the summer, we noted a new high in terms of peak concurrent traffic across all of Conviva publishers. We call it the night of bastards, brawlers, and ballers, which was the night that HBO Game of Thrones Bastard Bowl premiered, along with the NBA Finals, which was a sad moment for those of us from the Bay Area. And finally, the WWE WrestleMania, all in the same night. Those three events passed the World Cup in terms of concurrent peak traffic from the past 5 years. So that's both fascinating and maybe a troubling commentary about our culture overall. But thank you.
Thank you. That was great. Good. You gave me a good segue into talking about some of the stuff we're doing. So I'm Daniel Sanders. I'm from Verizon Digital Media Services. So we're a division of Verizon that basically has been chartered with providing tools for OTT operators, content owners, service operators to put themselves on the map. And that would be namely Edgecast CDN, Uplink, which is a server-side ad insertion and content protection service. So we do DRM and we do ad insertion, server-side ad insertion to get you around ad blockers and to provide an improved ad insertion experience. And Volicon, which is media monitoring. If you're a broadcaster and you go into your NOC, you'll probably find a Volicon installation. So those three components, plus a few other things we've built, are what make up the DMS group. And we're underneath the AOL unit that Verizon acquired last year, and they have a whole bunch of ad tech. So where can you see our stuff? For example, if you're watching the NBA Finals, not sure I'm allowed to say the numbers, but we also had a very high peak. We were streaming Watch ESPN. We were doing server-side ad insertion. We had our slicer software down at the source, capturing it. We also were watching the Conviva stats in our NOC, and that was actually a record night for us as well. But so we were delivering that video. You can see our stuff if you load a web player on Huffington Post or on TechCrunch. If you watch Jerry Seinfeld's Comedians in Cars on the web, you'll see an example of Uplink and Edgecast. And, you know, we continue to deliver video for a lot of big social media companies and video services, some of which I'm not allowed to name, but you know them all. And prior to doing this, I was at Crackle, Sony Pictures ad-supported video service, and I was in charge of building out the technology there. So I sort of experienced that whole process of getting our service out onto different devices throughout the years when these devices were evolving a lot. And I think that's kind of how I ended up with Mark and connected with Mark.
Somehow we managed to run off any broadcasters or publishers.
That's right. Well, I think you can see we've got a really amazing panel, and I just realized that I forgot to give context for who I am in terms of my company. So I work for Beamer. What we do is video encoding technologies that enable very, very high quality video at low bit rates. So one of the themes that we're going to be discussing here is as we get into next generation services and really exciting sort of moving beyond, you know, traditional quote TV, you know, it involves things like 4K and HDR, and we're, you know, hopefully we'll get a few minutes to talk about what that means. But that means bandwidth, and in some cases we already have constrained networks. In other cases, we have consumers who have to pay more for the data. So what does that mean? Does it mean we just don't deliver the more premium experience, or are there solutions? And that's what my company does. Okay, let's launch in here. I would like the panel to, and for this one, this is probably one of the few questions where, you know, we'll start with Josette and we'll sort of go down the line. Tell us if there's one thing that sticks out in your mind that characterizes the user experience difference between traditional TV, sort of what we've known for the last, you know, 50 years, and a hybrid service, next generation, either what's here, what's coming, and it can be, you know, it can be a feature, it can be an, you know, experience, whatever. Give us just one major differentiation. Like to hear.
Convenience.
That's a good one.
Just one. Okay, I have others. Okay.
Dana?
I would say interactive.
Okay.
That the end users were driving the process.
Inconsistent.
I'd say surprising. Like, you never know what's going to be a hit.
Wow.
Virality.
Wow. That's it's amazing. I'm struck that it's all about, the answers all are about the consumer is now in the driver's seat of the entertainment experience. And that's really what is defining hybrid or next generation services. I see heads nodding, so are we in agreement? Okay.
Well, the consumer's always been the driver's seat. It's just that the entertainment
They didn't have any
industry
choice.
never paid attention to the consumer
They never had a
until
steering
about
wheel.
10 years ago. So, I mean, it's not like the consumers don't vote. They vote with their wallets, right?
That's true. That's good. Okay. Very interesting. On that, let's continue this. How does what's the panel's thoughts on how the method of consumption, you know, affects the user experience? And where I'm going with this question is, you know, time shifting. You know, if I'm watching now on a mobile phone, does that change? Do I still want CNN, you know, or whatever, you know, Fox or whatever? Forget the network. But do I still want it just streamed to my phone, or do I want something different? How does the method of consumption?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, not just the method, but the content itself could be interesting. So when I think about, you know, giving the child kind of the new babysitter, which is the iPad, and you've got children programming, and there's a bunch of features that you can enable around social interactions or kind of extras, you know, who are the various actors in a scene. That's probably the last moment you want to kind of throw all these whiz-bang features at an iPad and a kid. But when you're on the big screen in the home, maybe that's where you start to introduce additional features around, you know, maybe home monitoring, you know, who's at the doorbell or mom's calling on the phone. So I think it's not just about the device itself, but it's also about kind of the content in place as well.
Yeah, I mean, we actually just completed some research across our publisher base about consumption of different content types on different device types and different times of day, and out of home versus in home. And there were a couple of interesting things there. One's not so surprising, I guess, which is that live sports out of home is very, very popular on out-of-home networks, and the consumer sensitivity to quality of experience issues is much lower. Which, if you think that through, if you want to watch the game, and regardless of where you are, and you've got a mobile phone, and it buffers a little bit or it pixelates a little bit, you're more willing to put up with that out of home. Whereas in home, there's much more sensitivity to quality of experience and turning off or switching to different screen type. The other thing that was unexpected in that research that we found is that there tended to be a little more short-form content consumed in-home than out-of-home, which was very, very surprising. And that we are correlating right now to the notion that every home is multi-screen, and that when you're in the home, you're focusing in on the screen you want, and you're able to use it for both short or long form, whereas out of home, you're a little more focused on the screen in the moment. So there's some interesting different trends.
Yeah, I mean, we used, when I was back at Crackle, we used Conviva a lot, and it did tell us a lot about what was going on with the usage. And, some of it's surprising, some of it is pretty obvious. Like, I would still be amazed when I would see like somebody reporting a bug that only occurs after somebody had been watching our streams for 6 hours at a time. And I would go, usually always big screens. I'm talking about our big screen implementations, PlayStation, Xbox, or Roku box, or something like that. But yeah, it would be that we users who watch for hours and hours. And mobile is not. It's going to be shorter form. And if the topic of this panel is sort of how to get better at delivering those experiences, then yeah, you have to sort of program for that. Have programming tools in your CMS that know how to put the right stuff in the right place on the right device at the right time of day, at the right physical location for the user. And I don't think the CMSs of today are quite there yet. The big ones that everyone's using.
And also, I might add that the CTM has done a lot of great research in this area, and if you ever really wanted to really dig into that topic, Gisette is the person for that.
Thank you very much.
On the other, we help pay for it.
Satisfied client.
Yeah, the other side would be that if we're going to talk about mobile, go back in time a little bit and say mobile started specifically in Asia, where they spend all their time outside their home. And so that content delivery and all those technologies came along with the networks that had to be able to be capable of it. If digital Hollywood is anything, it should be about looking towards the future. So let's try to tinge this a little bit more and say, what is the future of this various consumption patterns? I think that's really what you really have a good panel here for today, is that you're going to have multiple devices, better quality of service, but the usage model for it, despite glitches and glotches, is that it's more immersive and it has to be readily available. But the real consumption patterns are still the same. News, sports, weather.
Yeah, I agree. Because
those are the things that are time sensitive, and everything else will be a binge watching. But also, it wouldn't work at all if you didn't have robust networks like a Verizon's network. And as we go forward, the demands keep going up. And if you think about 4K, so if we're going to talk about the future and ultra high definition, our expectation level is just going faster and faster forward, and that's what I think would be a good part of the topic that hybrid TV should
And
address.
I think you mentioned previously 5G coming along and affecting that, or in one of our discussions. But yeah, that's going to
there's something like 900% increase in the last 4 years of video delivery content. So if you think about LTE, which was the last big upgrade, that was distinctly engineered for video delivery, because the 3Gs, which were only halfway built at the time, got buried by video content. So now we're actually engineering and architecting the next jump with this video consumption in mind of these higher things. So like a 5G will be like a 5 gigs per second connection speed. And so I also, since we're trying to talk about the future a bit, phones are getting bigger and tablets are getting smaller. Well, eventually there's going to be a collision point, and the phablet I don't know if I like that term, but there's going to be something about that mobile experience. But then everyone still wants to come home with their 70-inch because that's where the real money will be made from the advertising elements, and that's where the real enjoyment comes with all the streaming and delivery and on-demand and binging.
And there have been these devices like the Chromecasts that attempt to bridge the two, but my personal take is that they're still too complicated for the average user to really...
Oh, the mom rule. Can my mom use it?
Yeah, because I've seen people struggle with them, but...
Go.
To that point, we are sort of a forward-looking panel here, and most of us are technologists, so we tend to have a different look on the future than the average consumer. So in our primary consumer surveys that we run every year, last year we had one specifically on the growth of mobile video. And at the end of the day, there are two things that really prevent even millennial consumers from adopting mobile video as much as they should. The first is that the experience is still not all that great, except Verizon, for instance, has a very good network. I mean, okay, but also okay, I know it's a mutual admiration society on this panel, but I mean, seriously, obviously Verizon has made it their business to promote the quality of their network, not the price that consumers pay. But seriously, even on Verizon, I mean, sometimes the content doesn't play all that well. It still buffers. I mean, we are buffering.
That's
and
when they're using a competitor CDN.
It's 2016, and mobile video is buffering, ladies and gentlemen. That
You
is
should be happy
not
it works at all.
That is not appropriate. That is not appropriate. And the ads crash before the show, and they're too long. And so, the young users just disconnect from that. The other thing is the price of data. I mean, we were told that's still a huge deterrent. Now, that is where most of our sponsors make money. I mean, data is a huge financial game, and that's what is allowing our telecommunications companies to bid for spectrum and all that. So there's a business rationale, but that also has to come down. So there are some fundamentals that we tend to disregard. Well, okay, so there'll still be plenty of money to sponsor things, but I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, from a consumer standpoint, the cost of cellular data is still too high.
So how does the panel see broadcast, pay TV, and OTT services to kind of do some general categorization, the UXs converging or diverging? So, to set this up, if anybody has Comcast or if you've seen the X1, really amazing set-top box experience. I mean, whether you're pro cable or it's an awesome experience. But then there's some really great OTT apps. So I'm curious, again, forward-looking, is this that really progressive cable companies and pay TV companies are just, they're going to be innovating their UXs to the point that consumer doesn't care if it's satellite, coax cable, or OTT internet. It's just I get my TV from company XYZ. Don't really know how, don't care because I don't need to care. Is that where we're going? Is that the future?
So you mean specifically from a UX perspective?
UX, yeah. Right now, let's just focus on the user experience.
I think from a user experience perspective, the user really doesn't care. I mean, I think all of us probably would agree. As long as it works and the content's cool and it doesn't rebuffer too much, I think the consumer doesn't care. But in general, I think we're all seeing various types of companies trying different things. I've seen here at Verizon, I've seen all the traditional broadcasters moving into the OTT space. But back at Crackle, we sold a license to our channel to Comcast, so you can get Crackle bundled in with Comcast now. So it's just things are going in all these directions. Where it settles down, I have no idea.
Yeah,
I care. I'm so sick of all these different passwords, and I'm sick of my eye strain on my mobile when I'm trying to type them in. I want it to be voice activated, or I want it to be a Netflix where it has some knowledge of what I like. If it knows I like hockey games and the Red Wings, If there's a Red Wings game on, NHL.com tells me that.
But you don't care what type of pipe the video came down.
No, but he was
into.
talking about UX.
Oh,
So,
okay.
I think the UX is terrible. I think
Yeah.
we need to centralize that. somewhere.
There's definitely a convergence happening. You think about Netflix, you talked about Xfinity. You know, Comcast announced they're going to offer Netflix through their service. So you really see some of these, you know, pure cable companies, you know, embracing some of these OTT providers, and these OTT providers finding creative ways to get into cable companies. So the content definitely is converging. And I think it's interesting that you focus on the UX, because I've always stated it's very tough to differentiate once your user clicks play. Once they click play on content, how is it different between one platform to the next? So I think you're going to continue to find them, you know, companies trying to find creative ways to create richer experiences. And I think you're right. The question is, you know, with the explosion of all these different content sources, there's been discussions about, you know, who's the next aggregator, right? For TV was the aggregator, then you've got this explosion of apps, and somebody's going to aggregate apps. I think it's not necessarily the next aggregator that's important, but the question is the interaction. I think you hit on the head when you talked about voice commands. So if you've got these different ways in which you can interact with content, how do you interact with it in a seamless way? So for example, I've got an Amazon Fire. If I watch content in one app and I want to skip back 10 seconds, it works differently than a different app. How do I use voice commands or maybe even hand gestures? So I think creating a seamless experience into a diverse set of app ecosystems and different content sources is going to get interesting as well.
Yeah, I think if you just look at it from the perspective of the two incumbents, if you will, from both perspectives. You have the internet natives, you have Amazon, you have Google, and you could have Netflix. You can claim Netflix as an internet native. They know how to use data. They know how to use data, and if you think about the UX as being, it doesn't matter what the UX design is. Is it a data-driven UX? Is the content you want or the content you might like, because other people like that kind of content like you, there and easily accessible, right? So, yes, there has to be a good user experience, but the whole notion of discovery and personalization and recommendations that the internet natives know how to do so well is why their user interfaces are being perceived better by us as consumers, because we see the stuff we want to see. But you look at the incumbents, the cable companies and the other folks, they come from a programmer guide view of the world, which is, I have a programming guide. I need to put it on the screen in a better way. And those two worlds need to come together. The programming guide has to be data-driven. It has to be personalized. And therefore, these companies have to be better at using data in everything they do in their businesses.
Yeah, I think what's also interesting to add to that as well is that, they're obviously restricted by the guide, but the platforms that you see these new OTT entrants on is obviously much more powerful. You get a set-top box release, and they're tied and tethered to that set-top box till they actually pay it back. Whereas, these other providers for OTT platforms are introducing streaming appliances every year, and they're getting more powerful, and you create richer experiences, which, can run just more than content on them, which is interesting as well.
Yep.
So it's about the user experience, but the UI is really, they're all the same anyway. It
To a
seems.
certain extent.
Right.
Yeah.
How do you find stuff? How
Yeah.
easy is it to find?
And
How
does
close is it
react
to you?
yeah.
Yeah, because what you care about as an OTT provider is people watch more. And
So there
yeah.
is a $1 billion business to be made there in content discovery.
There is,
in
without a
content
doubt.
recommendations discovery
And
that really
navigation.
works, that supersedes
We gotta go.
other players. No, we're in violent agreement.
I think you're right,
Yeah.
for sure. I mean,
No, seriously,
Yeah,
that's
a
what I-
colleague said to me recently when I was talking about, different providers in the space, and we were looking at user experiences, and one had a search bar right on the home screen, and another didn't. Netflix did not. And he suggested that it just got to the point where you just trust Netflix to know who you are and give you what you want. So the moment that search bar leaves that homepage, you know that they're probably doing a better job of creating experiences for you.
It's interesting. Does anybody have any or care to comment about the FCC set-top box initiative that's going on? Because this strikes me, and I don't know if the audience is following this, but just real quick, why it's relevant to this discussion. The FCC is working very hard to put rules in place that basically will mandate that you are, and it's a very complicated discussion, and so I'm going to give it really not enough airtime to explain what's going on. But bottom line, what they're attempting to do is separate the set-top box from the content, so that you, in theory, at least what they would like to see, is that I could subscribe to my cable operator in my area. In my area, it happens to be Cox. So I could subscribe to Cox, but I could buy a set-top box from whoever, from company XYZ. And the reason why I raise this, and I want to see if somebody's willing to to give some commentary on it, is that the ramifications of this, of course, now if I'm an operator, now I'm being forced to do some things. You can talk about whether there's a revenue loss because I'm not leasing the set-top box. There's kind of that perspective. But all of a sudden, I do lose a bit of control over the experience because now I have a very basic, maybe I'm limited to an HTML app that will run on a low-power processor. And guess what? I can't add advanced features. The Comcast X1 box is expensive, but it's amazing. But guess what? An operator wouldn't be able to offer that level of service. So does anybody have any comment on that? And if that's good, bad, and different?
It's interesting. I mentioned I work with over 1,000 video distributors. Many of those are cable companies you'd never know the name of. It's clear the FCC is attempting to try to find their way. They haven't quite honed in on something. They have a couple different proposals they're considering. One is, if you've got a set-top box, you've got to create a platform for that so others can load apps on that. Another proposal is if you're offering cable set-top box experiences, you have to offer OTT experiences so folks can have kind of have it to go. So I think they'll hone in on something. But what I found most interesting in kind of talking to cable operators, 4 years ago, they were afraid of becoming a dumb pipe, right? I'm afraid to be a dumb pipe. How do I diversify? And now the conversations are a little different. They're like, in some respects, that's their highest margin business, and they're a little afraid to compete in the OTT space. So if you got a mandate like the FCC telling them now you've got to go compete in the OTT space, I think you're probably going to see an acceleration of consolidation happening.
And Dana, I'm sure you can confirm that a lot of the tier 2, tier 3 cable cos are already giving up on video, and they are basically, and of course that's why your business is exploding.
They
right?
are, and we've got some solutions for them. I mentioned we've got a white label experience where it's a storefront where it's kind of cookie cutter out of the box. It's resonating with some, but you're right. There's quite a few that are stagnant and don't want to move for sure.
And aren't set-top boxes pretty much obsolete?
Yeah, so I'd like to comment on that a little bit too, because we've done research in that area as well. So first of all, an obvious fact is that upgrading the set-top box for a consumer is a large expense for an operator. And so, there is good news with those set-top boxes available at retail, even though they're a lot less sophisticated than some of the ones that are deployed by the Comcasts and the Verizons or the AT&T Uverse, right? So that's one fundamental thing. The other thing is that, very frankly, we are now in a world where everybody is in everybody else's business. So what that will enable is the rise of those virtual MVPDs, okay? And so we're asked often, what do you see as the main threat for established MVPDs? And to me, it's not the full screens and the awesomeness and the MCNs and all that. That's not in the same league. That's not what competes. What competes are the large OTTs like Hulu deciding to deploy a bouquet of cable channels and doing so virtually over the top. That becomes, especially for millennials, a really good way of competing against the established players. So we are entering a very interesting era in which where sometimes the provision of video services is absolutely not economical from the standpoint of margins for the operators, for the traditional guys. And at some point, we actually did some very sophisticated financial analyses around that. And we concluded that at some point, and we're already seeing that to a small extent, operators might actually redefine their relationship with content providers altogether, instead of being the ones that actually license channels, pay for carriage, et cetera. I might say at an increased cost, which is absolutely untenable because the margins are so slim. Then instead of doing that, you enable the delivery of virtual channels. And I think Verizon is very advanced in that, going in that strategic direction. So you sort of flip the relationship completely.
And to go back to my glib comment about STBs, the televisions are becoming so much more advanced and capable. You have, if you want to talk about competition in STBs, an Apple TV is a pretty good competitor against some of that. So the real value would be in the level of services in my mind. So even if you are a tier 3 cable guy in Des Moines, Iowa, if you are having services and a service layer that allows you to go from your iPad, watch some of the, control a DVR, pull up stuff, watch and schedule things, send notes to your kids to turn off the TV when you notice that it's 10 o'clock and they're still watching, Cartoon Network. Those levels of services, I think, will be the anti-churn methodology rather than just saying I'm going to give you a bigger DVR, cache, or some of these little niche-y things that prolong the STV market.
I agree. That box is toast.
So I recently got a demo of Sky UK. They have a service called Sky Now, and it's their OTT service, and it's really fantastic what their strategy is. They basically presented that they want the consumer at 12 pounds. So whatever that is, roughly about $20, $18, whatever. But all the way up to, I think their top end package is like 110, 120 pounds. Anyway, and they have a range of experiences that go from pure OTT with an off-the-air tuner, and it's a Roku box. And I'll tell you, when you look at the user experience, when you look at the guide, it's not quite as snappy. It's definitely doesn't, I didn't say, wow, that's amazing, but I said, this is more than acceptable. And for 12 pounds, I can get all the off-air HD, which of course in the UK, there's a lot more because, it's, all state-owned, all government-owned. But that's not the point. Along with OTT, and I've got a really nice entertainment experience, but then you can go all the way up to, they have the big massive DVR with, I think they're also using RDK, and I mean, it's kind of an X1 type. So they also can show this ultra premium high end. And that just really struck me, there's a rhetoric kind of in the industry around, are cable companies dead, is pay TV dead? And no, absolutely not. Now they're reinventing their business, they're expanding their offerings, but this is all relevant to this hybrid TV discussion because, depending, I guess, on what side of the table or where we sit in our respective businesses, maybe we want certain things to happen. But the fact of the matter is that there's some really fabulous experiences that are being invented. So here in the U.S., Sling TV. Sling TV, I mean, $20 a month, that's pretty amazing. Now is it for all of us? Is it going to suit my needs? I don't know. But it's individual. So I think it's awesome.
And
I'd like to.
Always the best STV is the one the customer buys and maintains.
Right.
Yeah, exactly,
I
exactly.
hear that PlayStation's View service
View,
is doing
yeah.
pretty well.
Oh, yeah.
So that's
Yeah,
you're doing
absolutely.
With virtual reality built in, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Can I ask a question?
yes,
So
absolutely.
in the context of, the set-top box is dead and all that, so how do you channel surf on Apple TV?
Well, no, I'm just saying that's one aspect. Maybe you're also having an over-the-air broadcast antenna as well for local.
And how do you control your internet delivery to that so that you don't get, Sling TV's great except when it freezes and has to recycle. And
Completely.
So the set-top box offers a really robust user experience that you can't get.
Yet.
And
Yeah, when I,
There's still people with rotary phones, too.
What's that?
There's still people with rotary phones, too.
Those, but there's a much better user experience on the set-top box.
Presently, but things are changing quickly. Wouldn't you not agree? And the recycle rate of TVs is actually accelerating.
I think just to jump in, I don't think the panel, we're not trying to necessarily take a position. We're not taking a position, but because your point's absolutely. The reason why I brought up the Sky Now service with the hybrid is that their guide was so nicely integrated that it was not 100% seamless. There was a little bit of a pause. You were switching in a different environment when you went to the OTT side, but the ability to surf exactly what and then be able to somewhat seamlessly go without having to switch HDMI, open an app. It was pretty great.
And a set-top box is an integrated device, so if you do all these other things,
Yeah.
you don't have a PVR. Well, you can add a PVR to the TiVo desk, so yeah, it's another.
No, my point would be that this will all move up into a network. You're not going to have this physical piece of hardware that's going to do your DVR. You'll own that content across many hybrid TV platforms and will be able to access it. That's the way I see it working.
Yeah.
That it will never be natively sitting there localized in your living room, because you're going to want to consume it on a train, upstairs, on about something.
I agree in time that will happen.
It's happening now.
It's,
It's happening now. Can you get all 4 major networks on any over-the-top service?
There's a licensing panel right down there.
It's so close. It's so close.
Well, I got it here. So
Actually, Google's really close.
I mean, I do. If the point you're making is that we're not there yet, I totally agree, and that any predictions of the imminent death of the box maybe slow them down. But yeah,
I mean, I think an analogy is to look back. It's a little more complicated because there were way more services on a set-top box. But I look at the evolution of the cell phone in the carrier market, right? You had a locked phone with a carrier deck on it and an integrated experience that was really easy to use if you like that experience. Some people like Motorola's, some people like Nokia when Nokia made phones. And then as time evolved and the people who built the better operating systems and the better user experiences on the device, that disintermediated the carrier deck from, and this is some of the same conversation we're having, we're disintermediate the service provider's user interface from your experience of the device.
But the lock phone was great because every carrier would give away a phone to get you to come over. Now,
There's pros and cons.
So you
There's
just
pros
want
and
free
cons.
stuff, is that it? No, you were
Yes,
paying for that over months.
And you'll still have that option.
I have a free Nokia N70 I can give you.
I have a box of those too.
Where
are you gonna get a SIM card?
Any takers?
It's interesting.
Okay.
I just maybe to add to the conversation, I feel a little conflicted because I think about a year ago, the question was asked of a panel, is pay TV dead? And, at the time, the context I had was, my kids were, still watching pay TV. But definitely it's quickly changing. My daughter now will sit on the couch with her phone in front of the TV that just is in an off position, which is interesting. But I think another interesting fact is when you get CEOs of major organizations, charter CEOs saying, young people can't afford TV. Bob Iger saying the bundle is dead as we know it, right? Those are content companies that their whole business is around servicing entities. So I think there's still a lot of other dynamics on the other side that are keeping folks resonating and attached to that experience. They suggest 88% of live primetime programming happens live. It's not time shifted. I do sign up for the set-top box every year when the football season comes on, but then I just get rid of it just as quick. So I think I'm a bit torn. I think it's not dead yet, but it is happening. It's happening fast for sure.
Okay, great, excellent discussion. We could have a whole panel on just this. I want to pivot because one of the and we've really been touching on it. In fact, this last thread leads into it. I want to give Josette a chance to share for a few minutes some recent study, very recent study, and the purpose of this is. We can talk about all these amazing things that we can do technically, and the fact that TVs are getting more powerful and they'll run all kinds of cool apps and all this. But at the end of the day, the business model and the licensing and really more the business model, particularly with advertising. If we completely disrupt the business, then you don't have a business, and you can have a lot of cool technology. And so Josette has done, particularly with millennials, some excellent research that I'll let her share some highlights of around attitudes of advertising and what that means, because this plays right into economics. At the end of the day, we have to make money.
So thank you, Mark. So I promise not to monopolize the conversation around this, so I will just share a few high-level tidbits of a very long, protracted research project that we undertook last summer with our MBA students at the Marshall School of Business. So it was entitled Millennials on Millennials, and we are about to read out some of the findings to our sponsors finally. And basically, those were older millennials because we had previously identified the sweet spot, for instance, for the growth of mobile video, to be individuals between 25 years old and 35 years old. So the older millennials, not the younger ones. Okay, so that was just. So that is a demographic that our MVPD clients really look to for the future of their businesses. So we were told that the broadcast and cable TV, to the points made on the panel earlier, were mainly used by these demographics, by these students who interviewed their peers, by the way, in focus groups and personal interviews. It's only used as background media to watch broadcast live sports, okay? So, and events. So, but other than that, it's background media. It's a passive medium for them. Typically, when they are tuned into that, they do other things. They communicate with friends. They use second screen, but not directly related to what they are seeing on the main screen, except if it is to bring up statistics about players, if they are watching a sporting event. So OTT for them is becoming the prime way that they are actually consuming video. And for that, of course, they expect the advertising to be very different on streaming media than it is on broadcast TV. Their tolerance for ads on broadcast cable TV is higher because they tend to ignore the ads. I mean, they use it as a scheduled time to do other things. And that breaks the experience for them, which is considered a no-no. In terms of what were the points that they disliked the most about advertising, about the current state of advertising across video services, they detested cheesy ads that were in poor taste, that were offensive because they portrayed women poorly or minorities poorly, for instance. They did not like ads that were sloppily executed because they felt that the brand owner did not care enough to actually produce something engaging. They did not like ads that specifically addressed the virtues of a particular product. But instead, they preferred the ads that connected users to the value of the brand, the values embodied by the brand. I'm thinking Red Bull, for instance, being very innovative in that regard, okay? Now, what resonated conversely were ads that really engaged them on the emotional level, you know, featuring cute animals, for instance, puppies, or ads that were funny. Most importantly, ads that did not disrupt the viewing experience. So that goes towards consolidating greatly that dynamic digital ad insertion will be favored going forward if it is in fact driven by algorithms that know what they're doing and you know, insert an ad that is in fact in tune with the context, which remains to be seen because that is not really the case right now. So millennials, also those millennials told us, we want personalized ads. We really do not like the ads that don't cater to our preferences. I mean, the media companies should know what we're watching, etc. So that part was not too surprising. We expected that. However, what we did not expect was their intense reluctance to share highly personal data. So, you know, often you hear, oh, you know, the young demographics, you know, they don't care if the data is out there. You know, they're obviously on all the social networks. And, you know, basically, give them a coupon, they'll give you the social security number. Not at all. Okay, so that was a really chilling realization for us. And that was actually an overwhelming findings that they said, okay, you know what? We will give you our information in aggregate, but we will stop sharing at a certain point, and some of them even said, we even have fake Facebook accounts that we can send you to if we don't like what you're sending us. So, you know, that was interesting. So do personalize, but find a way of personalizing without bothering us too much. As far as social media is concerned, social media was considered effective in terms of, again, connecting to the values of the brand of the product. And it integrated the ads better with the experience. However, they told us that they seldom buy based on the ads that they were pushed their way via social media. So there is also a disconnect there. Okay, there's more tolerance, but it doesn't exactly prompt a buying decision on our part. So I think I will stop there. It's just a few tidbits.
How would you summarize if somebody's sitting out here thinking about building, you know, a next generation service? What advice would you give them based on some of your findings here in terms of monetization? Because that's what we're talking about is.
Okay, so the ads that you're offering in your stream have to be consistent with the content that you're offering. Okay, So there has to be a direct correlation between the content, whether it's dynamic ad insertion or whether the ad is native. For instance, whether the advertiser has actually sponsored a particular show and you just happen to see their brand as product placement. That's also acceptable to our millennials. Make the ad short. Make them entertaining, make them engaging. Okay, and do not commit the mortal sin of disconnecting them from the screen that they are showing, because otherwise they're not going to return to it. Their tolerance is very low for that.
I think another point which is related to that and the notion of measurement is measure everything. Don't measure just your content, but measure your ads. It isn't integrated. If you're running an AVOD service, which is, we haven't talked a lot about the difference between AVOD and SVOD and the value of a customer or service, but especially in an AVOD business. And if you look at the data from this past year, if you look at what happens with the Olympics and what's happening with the NFL right now, they are going to start building AVOD businesses that are standalone and purpose-built for the internet because people are watching less traditional linear TV. I mean, the ratings were down on both of two of the most important sporting events we know of, right? So now with AVOD, what's unique and an opportunity in internet is you can actually now measure everything. You don't have to have a Nielsen panel. You don't have to necessarily just do surveys. Those surveys are great to get directional information, but you can actually measure those ads and understand, are they contextually relevant to that content? Because that contextual relevance is actually personal. It's not necessarily, oh, this is a sporting event, so it should be a Nike ad. Right? It really is the person, and you have the opportunity in a service to measure all of that. And there's enough data processing and enough data capabilities that you can actually personalize ad experiences with dynamic ad insertion and understand different types of categorical ads that work for different demographics and different audience members in different content genres. And that's really the great opportunity of the internet and advertising. And then the last soapbox opinion thing is advertising has got to change, right? Because we can stop and skip and change things. And so the traditional ad pod, sequence of ads in a linear-like stream, it's going to have to change over time. Now, where is it going to go? Is it going to go more native or more product placement based? Who knows? But it will change. But using the data that we can get out of the current model we have, we can learn new ways and think about new ways to change advertising.
So Daniel, I know you have some experience with this
Yeah.
from Crackle, and not to
Yeah.
pull you back to Crackle, but can you add some
Again,
insights?
I think that was a great summation. And what I was thinking about when he was talking about that was, that's great. What am I going to do when I've managed to persuade an advertiser to give me $500,000 and their product is arguably not contextually relevant to anything that I have?
They're going to want to know. They'll want to know not to run that ad anymore.
I
Yeah,
know,
you have
but
to have
they.
significant inventories for that, any kind of
Yeah.
dynamic
That's
ad to
what-
work.
And I feel like even some of the very big providers have problems
Yes.
with getting that level of
Maybe you can
inventory.
give context for the audience, because I think we know what you're saying, but explain this, and yeah.
So when I was at Sony Pictures running the technology for the Crackle platform, we had a very good, very sizable ad business, but there was always a tension between the product guys going, these ads suck and they're annoying and this is stupid, and the ad sales guys, no offense to anyone in the room, saying, we've signed this deal, we have to run this many impressions by the end of the month. So, fundamentally, that's it.
And it was hard to sell.
And it was,
So that's what will change.
Thank goodness for HTML5.
Those period-based insertion orders will evolve. They'll change. We'll stop.
And
Yeah.
as
Programmatic
usage
potentially
grows on the
is-
platform, because what Daniel just touched on is part of the issue was, and Crackle is has a lot of users, but if there's not enough viewings, that ad, like you say, it has to be X number by the end of the month, and you have to serve it. So
we would
that
look
means
at competitors that had much more traffic, and we would see the same ad coming
That's
back
right,
around
absolutely.
again and again.
So it explains why if you watch AVOD services and you always see whoever, the same ad over and over, the exact same ad, and you're saying, don't these people have it together? They do. It's just they have to sell that ad. They have to run it.
Or they have a slot open that they can't fill, and they keep.
And that advertiser keeps buying it. That's correct. Okay, so we have 20 minutes left here, and what I want to do is I do want to leave 5 or 6 minutes at the end for some questions. I assume that maybe you've been taking some notes, saying, "Hey, I want to ask the panel." So we will get to questions, give you an opportunity there. But I'd like to talk just a little bit about technology. We've had a wonderful sort of business model discussion and talking about some more general aspects. But we're talking about the mobile, kind of a mobile first world, which is one scenario that we're laying out here as we're all talking about how consumers are consuming more and more content on a mobile device. Now that may be a tablet, it may even be a tablet in a home, but the point is it's a small screen. It's not the main screen hanging on the wall. So I'm curious to get some reaction and commentary on what about HDR and 4K, better experiences. How does all that fit in a mobile first world,
Why don't we
or
ask
in an app world?
Has anybody ever used screen mirroring? Does anybody? It's okay. Isn't that almost the ultimate of taking the mobile experience and putting it on a big screen? I mean, that's a
Can you repeat that again?
screen mirroring, where you take your phone and you marry it to a large HD.
It's like casting.
I would like to tell you something. I'm the chairman and CEO of Acumen Technologies. I'm the one who invented the projector phone technology.
Okay.
That is like far more superior to screen mirroring.
Okay. In what sense?
And project content anywhere, anytime, any place.
What if my TV's already taken up all that space on the wall?
Don't need TV anymore.
Oh.
Just don't have any opening.
I was gonna say, here's another panel. Well, I think what I was trying to make a point was that there's gonna be different new ways of consumption. But if my 70 inch is taking up most of my wall space, then I don't have any place to project that, do I?
I say you're from Nokia, right?
Yes.
Your head of innovation, you should ask her about this.
Okay. We talk
So-
almost every morning.
So I guess where I was going with the question was a little more. Does the panel feel that HDR and UHD is going to drive, maybe even some might argue prop up the premium side of the business, or how's the consumer feel?
I think there's still a bit of room to grow, right? I think the interesting point, kind of sitting as an exchange in some respects, like we are between content providers and video distributors, is that it's got to be positive demand on both sides. Content providers got to create that content. Video distributors have to enable experiences to be able to distribute that. So there's still, I think, some room for growth, but my sense is at some point there's some diminishing returns, right? How many pixels can the eye see at some point, right? But there's definitely some room to grow, though.
Yeah, we won't get into that argument. Are more pixels actually better?
That resonates for me because I get asked a lot of times, do you guys support 4K? Could I launch a 4K service? Okay, when are you actually going to launch it? And I don't see the money where the mouth is on some of those technologies yet.
In most of our publishers, they're capturing in 4K. A lot of them are capturing natively in 4K, and then they're just downcoding for distribution. So original assets are stored and captured in 4K, but yeah, most of the networks, most of the devices, you don't need a 4K stream to any phone on the planet today. I mean, you won't be able to visually tell that that's a 4K stream. But a 70-inch TV in your living room, you can tell that's a 4K stream. So in some cases, 4K makes sense. In some cases, it doesn't. But it will get captured, and the majority of video capture will always be done at the highest resolution possible, and then it'll be variable bitrate distributed.
And that's why it's kind of a nice thing to every once in a while watch a sporting event on your UHD aerial for that uncompressed look at a football game, let's say. It's pretty sweet.
Yeah.
You can actually see it. Colors kind of pop a little bit more.
So what is and this one I'm going to tee up for Ed, and then let the rest of you comment, because this runs right into the center of what Conviva does. Curious if you can tell us, Ed, based on some of your latest findings, what is the impact of streaming quality on user engagement, and which translates to ARPU and other metrics that we would be interested in.
It's very variable, right? It's very variable based on the service type, the device type, the content type. Like I said earlier, in some cases, consumers will suffer some buffering. I mean, there's a great Ericsson study out that shows that that buffering symbol, they did a study and they showed the buffering symbol to people, and then they showed them horror films, and their heart rate went up higher on the buffering symbol than it did in a horror film. So we have been conditioned to really dislike that symbol.
genre.
Exactly. It's a new Friday the 13th theme. Yeah. Just wear the
Into the
buffering
buffering.
symbol. You know, that's the new Halloween costume this year. But in some cases we're more accepting of that in certain contexts. And our study showed that in live sports out of home, you're more willing to put up with the buffering symbol than in home, right? But the real answer there is you as a service provider need to measure it. It's very dependent on time of day and content type. There is no formula across all of our service providers. We have over 80 different premium providers globally using our service to measure streaming quality, and they all have a different model, and they all have a different way they manage and set alerts. Now, there certainly are benchmarks you can use, and you should try to benchmark your service, but also those benchmarks are very geographically sensitive. So when HBO rolled out a service in the Nordics, their benchmarks were very different than they were in the US, because that culture has different sensitivity to different types. So you need to benchmark and understand how you can compare, but you in the end, you just need to measure, and you need to measure, and then you need to look and correlate or connect those experience metrics to engagement metrics. How long did I watch? And if you have enough data, which if you have a reasonable sized service, then you don't need an answer. You can look and see forward level indicators to say, oh, if streaming quality drops below X and buffering rate goes here, I'm going to see an engagement drop within 30 minutes. It's like measuring advertising. You can correlate this in real time and make real time decisions about how you provision your network, what you do in your player, whether you use a different CDN or not. These are all decisions you can make in real time based on the data, but it's very dynamic. It's also very variable in the state of the internet at any given moment. That's also what's very different about running an OTT service is what's happening in San Francisco is different from what's happening in LA, just because of the level of traffic in those areas across different peering points. So it's a much more complex environment that requires constant measurement and constant diligence into what's happening on your service.
Very interesting, and I think you addressed
So the
this,
answer was
but
yes.
Yes, it does
Is
matter.
there-
Question again?
is there any difference between live OTT, from the consumer perspective, the consumer willingness to put up with some of the, whether it's rebuffering or whatever, live OTT compared to VOD? Now, you mentioned sports; they seem to be, but I don't know if that's a function of they're out of home. It's the only
that was out of
chance
home.
they
In-home,
have.
in-home, they're very insensitive.
They're
to
very-
it.
yeah,
very
yeah.
insensitive to it. But
Yeah.
I'll make a meta comment about that and let other people talk. Is that on demand, Game of Thrones is a live sport event.
Yes.
There are more people dialing into that thing on a Sunday evening when it's on than most other sporting events. So very popular. Video on demand can be thought of as a live event. So our definitions of what's live and what's on demand are also going to have to change.
Yeah, those debates, the people, those ratings were good. And
What debates?
oh,
Just two people.
knuckleheads there spouting off like this panel.
It's interesting because one of our more popular services is something we call Live Divide, where we capture live programming, turn it into an on-demand asset, and can deliver it out to our entire network in under 3 hours. So I think from a consumer standpoint, they, with the exception of probably sports and news and things like that, the quest for them is how quickly can you turn that live asset into an on-demand asset that I can then control my viewing experience. So I think that's the important element here.
Very interesting. Okay. What technologies are going to be critical, as we shift from managed networks to the open internet? And I'm thinking obviously there's video compression, more efficient, HEVC just as an example, but there's other things.
That's not
What's the panel's thinking around, as we move from these closed, whether it's cable network, satellite to OTT, what technologies?
5G, fiber. You're going to be pushing a lot of ones and O's, and it's not just broadcast TV. To go back to what we said about TVs being used for other purposes, you right now have, with the millennial, or just past that, the first whole generation, and I've said this before in panels here, whose entire life is digitized, from when they're in the womb with a sonogram, to every financial record, to every picture of their friends, to every show they might have bought, music that they downloaded, all has to go somewhere for a change, be reliably stored twice at least, and then has to be delivered without any kind of good algorithm on what is a picture of you on your bike at 6-year-old the same as a picture of your wedding? Well, Google's working on knowing that because there's going to be a funding methodology for that data that's terabytes and terabytes by the time you're 50. It has to be stored someplace and has to be reliably delivered. And where are you going to deliver it? Where you can see it best? Perhaps on connected TVs in the home, tablets, and in your car. Connected cars is a big thing I'm working on now. So the 5G and the fiber that connects those towers, because just because it can get to the tower doesn't mean it goes anywhere, to these big back ends of level 3s and AT&Ts.
To implement 5G, can they salvage the existing infrastructure like Verizon, T-Mobile?
Well, yeah, 5G inside the standard will have legacies for 4G. Not so much 3G, because I want that spectrum, and so there's going to be some turn-offs of these legacy systems, but that is not the technology I think he was caring about.
Yeah, I think the interesting technology is, somebody in the audience mentioned about set-top box, and the quality of experience is very tough to replicate. And there's companies out there attempting to solve this now. In the case of like an Aspera with file delivery, leveraging the internet, which is the Wild West, and attempting to turn that into a managed network, right? Same company, similar companies are attempting to do that with the live viewing experience. How do you create managed networks out of the open internet? I think that's where it gets interesting.
So it's a great time for CDNs, reinvented CDNs, and a fabulous time for data center providers.
Right, because that's the biggest anti-churn protection of anything. Once you've loaded all that into something, you're never going to move it. It's too big. It's too cumbersome. So you can actually own people for the rest of their lives.
It could be a good time for CDNs, or it could be a time where disruption caused by near-field communication between devices, peer-to-peer technologies. I think there are forces pushing in either direction.
I think it's interesting. In my notes here, I even wrote down, like caching solutions, and you've got now more. I heard earlier this year a very interesting presentation that the CDN business is greatly under pressure because, and Daniel, you would know about this too, not because you guys own and operate a CDN, but your former life, et cetera, is a lot of services are building. They're able to build their own CDN. They're adopting peer-to-peer. Look at what Netflix is doing, dropping. And they had to work really hard with Open Connect, and it was rejected for years. But now they're in all the data centers, and it's. The good news is now if you're in the CDN business, it's not so good. As a consumer, though, the quality of experience has improved.
Yeah,
and they're in control of it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the stuff that I'm really interested in at the moment is specifically tied to live events and how we can reduce latency and cut out that 30-second gap that HLS has introduced, so that if you're watching the event on your phone, you see the goal 30 seconds later than your neighbor did on traditional TV. So I'm kind of interested in those over UDP solutions that utilize UDP. Sometimes they have a P2P component. I'm always wondering if, just like VR, you thought it was coming 20 years ago with Lanier, and then it came around, and finally it's here. I wonder if P2P will eventually get to that place where it's
3D, it's going to be big.
Yeah, that one did.
It's going to be big, yes.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
That's an addition.
Okay, so we have about 6 minutes left, and I said I wanted to open it up for questions. If there are any questions, now's the time.
We answered everything. Great.
Wow. Okay, yes.
Good afternoon. You mentioned 4K kind of as operating and adjusting 4K kind of the native level. UHD is one level above 4K, correct?
No, that's the same. There's Ultra UHD, which will be the 8K.
Right. I meant Ultra.
They're all brands, by the way.
Pardon me?
They're just brands. Doesn't mean you're going to see 8K.
I just wanted to kind of get a sense of like the state of the union where things are with 4K and
You know what, a great rule of thumb for televisions and their generational things is when you go to Best Buy and you see a really scorching deal on an HD TV, you know that that standard is obsolete. So when you can buy a 40-inch for $299, they're getting rid of them
Yeah.
because the demand is probably not going to be there.
Yeah, I think maybe one data point as well is, I mentioned that you have to have content providers that create that content, video distributors that can help play that out.
Yeah.
We're starting to see our first demand for 4K packages that we offer. So, you know, it's definitely, the demand is starting to come, and we do offer 4K packages of content as well
Yeah.
today.
So, final comment, I think an answer to your question is the screens, we're now in a situation where the screens are basically out there. There's sufficient, you know, there's always a chicken and the egg. So you can create content, but nobody can watch it. We actually are in kind of an interesting situation, and we just do not have time to go into why. And I see some content owners in the room who could really go into the details of why. But the playback ecosystem is there in terms of screens in the consumer's home. There's sufficient penetration. People can watch 4K. The content, and for the most part, you can stream it and deliver it, for the most part. But there's some licensing issues around some technology standards. There's some reasons why it's not. You know, the content isn't flowing, isn't streaming widely yet, but it will be. It will be. Yes.
So comment simple, sorry.
Yeah, we'll take this gentleman and then.
Simple question, is delivery by satellite dead, or still got life in it needs to come?
No, the delivery by satellite's not dead because of the distances and the variety that they can put down. So,
Lack of interactivity doesn't matter, the fact that it's a fat pipe means it's.
well, there's fat pipe, but it's also that when you think of the distances involved in emerging markets, especially, you know, that's a content dream box for these guys because they want to sell into those markets as they come online. So no, satellite's not dead. Although some of the birds are dying, and that's expensive to put
that's
those up.
right.
But you know, SpaceX, there's another, to give Victor a plug, he's going to have at the CES a thing about space and content. At the CES show, he's going to have panels on that where you can come and visit that for.
Okay, yes.
So, there was a comment early on about how great the X1 platform was and expanded, and then we were told that set-top's dead. And another comment was made about how can you charge an advertiser so much money, you don't know that the ads are relevant, and whatever delivery mechanism there is. What we didn't really talk about today was personalization. Regardless of the device that I'm gonna watch my content on, so that you don't run into an effect where I'm seeing stuff I don't care about, where is the technology now, whatever the delivery mechanism is, to make sure if I do have to watch 30 seconds, that I'm seeing something that I care about?
It's still very early days. The data is being collected to make that possible. The processing and correlation of that data in real time to, let's say, a server-side dynamic ad insertion capabilities, such as VDMS has, that's not there in that time frame, right? Because we're talking milliseconds of latency that stuff has to happen. So that sort of personalization in real time of dynamic ads in the stream is still a ways away. But that said, you can do it categorically, which is better than what we do in traditional linear advertising today, which is by demo, right? And you just get put in a demo, and you know, based on what you're watching, we can create categories of viewers now that are much more fine-grained, you know, a fashionista or whatever you want to call it, and you can get very personalized ad experiences within that category.
And I think it's also important to note that it's not just the technology structures in place, it's the business structures.
Yeah, they don't buy like that.
Yeah, they don't buy like that. They're not ready to, you know, hey, if I have a movie that has a sailing scene, wouldn't it be cool if we sold sailing-related products? It's just, yeah, agencies don't buy on that level of.
Yeah, because they can't sit there and wait for that scene to come up in the inventory, right?
Yeah.
Production-wise.
And then just, yeah, I mean, I guess programmatic ad sales are supposed to.
We did touch
Supposed to get
personalization
us
when we
there,
talked about the
but,
Netflix and X1 and all that. But from the ad business, the inventories are nowhere near where they need to be. But luckily with HTML5 and things like that, you can make it once and deliver it 5 times, which they didn't used to be able to do that, and that was the
Yeah.
original killer for.
Okay, so, so,
I have a very important question. This is
okay,
for Verizon
1
and
minute.
also- Okay, Verizon and also for 4G. Do you feel that when you're delivering your content and all that, that devices are a big stumbling block for you to deliver content? Devices in consumers' hands. Do you feel that is a big stumbling block for you?
I mean, one of the platforms that I manage is the Uplink platform, and we've standardized around HLS, and we've provided SDKs to enable you to play video on devices that do not natively support HLS, like old Android devices. So, I mean, I don't know if I'd use the word stumbling block. It is an obstacle. You know, we're hoping MPEG-Dash gets us somewhere in that direction, but then Apple doesn't fully support Dash. But now there's this CMAF thing that's supposed to provide interoperability between fragmented MP4 and HLS. So yeah, it's one of the challenges to be addressed.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's definitely a challenge, but I think it's getting easier. Common encryption at some point will hit the market, but we're leveraging technology like just-in-time encryption, just-in-time packaging, so we can store once, service many. But you still definitely have those edge cases with a random DRM and a random device you've got to target. But it's heading in the right direction for sure.
Yeah, great point. DRM is yet another orthogonal
News. Hey, that is an awesome way to end. I love it.
Great ending.
That was on cue. All right, please join me in thanking the panel.
Thanks for playing.